everyone in this industry knows vacancy is the number one ROI killer. I can tell you as a person who has purchased many properties and has rented many properties that having those professional photos makes a difference. 5-star renters are attracted by 5-star properties.
100%.
You are not going to get top-tier renters if you are not providing a top-tier experience. On this episode of the Path Building Podcast, we are talking all things marketing. We're talking about getting the property live, handling objections from owners if they're unhappy with the rental rate that you are getting them, and how we can make residents raving fans of our business. Shocking, I know. All here on the Path Building Pod. Welcome back to the Path Building Podcast. I am Candice.
And I'm Kristen.
And today we are going to talk all things marketing. To be clear, marketing properties, getting properties on the market, listed, and rented.
Good. That was going to be my first question is, what do you mean by marketing?
I mean marketing properties. We're going to talk about that phase after make ready or turn or flip, where we are getting a property live and we are attracting residents to this property.
Wonderful. All right, Candice, my first question to kick us off here is, how do we go about setting expectations with owners for the marketing process? So how, as we're prepping into this, we've wrapped make ready, what are we saying to them? How are we letting them know where we are in the process?
I think there are a few things that a team should know really at any point. And I think this is information that should be ran at a minimum quarterly. I really like monthly, and I really like to keep this information year over year. And that's our days on market, our average rental rate, our price per square foot. And I like for us to have that information in our back pocket for our sales team to have. Because when we sell a property, Kristen, how often are owners asking us, how long is my property going to be on the market?
Every single time.
What are you going to rent my property for?
Every single time.
And how do you make sure I get a good resident?
Every single time.
So whenever we are going through this conversation with the owner, it's incredibly valuable to be able to say, hey, this is our average days on market because of the time of the year. We expect it to fluctuate to this number. Last year it was this, the year before it was this. This is how much it goes down this time of year or up this time of year. And being able to have that information at a glance, I think is incredibly valuable. So whenever we're setting expectations with owners, I don't love an arbitrary, we'll rent your property within blank amount of days. And I know that's a guarantee a lot of companies like to offer, but I don't think it's always attainable. And I do think it puts some undue pressure on our team to potentially not do the work we need to do to get a property on the market.
Absolutely. That makes total sense. Now, this may be a pivot here, but in the marketing process, is that simply the act of getting the property live and on the market, or does this cover all the way until we have an application? Where does the marketing process in your mind stop?
Okay, so I think that we have as we mentioned on our last episode, we have this really big overlap, and that overlap is our onboarding, our make ready, and our marketing. And so in my opinion, there is a delineation from the point that a property is made ready and now live on the market. A lot of work's going to happen at the same time there. That's the exact same thing with a marketing and leasing procedure. So you're going to begin leasing before marketing is completed, and marketing will often continue through leasing because if an application is denied, you're circling back to marketing. You're not going to pull an advertisement every time you get an application, then relist it when it falls through. We're going to have these processes overlap ever so slightly.
That makes total sense. So whenever we are approaching marketing here, I think the first thing that I think about for marketing is photos, right? So whenever we're going in and get photos, and I know like we mentioned on our last episode, a stance that I think we pretty firmly take is our marketing should begin once our make ready is complete. So I think that to just set the stage for where we are in this conversation right now, we are talking a property that is fully made ready. We are now going out. Is photos first step? Like, is that step number one? What happens next?
So there's going to be a point where we need to see the property, make sure it's photo ready. So this may happen in our onboarding process and we're going straight into our marketing. This may happen in our make ready process where we finish some work reviewing the property and we're beginning our marketing. So really photos tends to be one of those first items. We may prepare some marketing material and then go take the photos.
Sure.
But it is going to be one of those first things because you're not going to get a lot done with marketing without having photos of a property.
Now, Candice, do we need to have a professional photographer go and take photos?
Okay. I do think you should. And I think you do a property a very big disservice by doing internal photos. I know that it doesn't always make sense. Sometimes our properties are not at the price point where it makes sense for us to have these professional photos taken. But I can tell you as a person who has purchased many properties and has rented many properties that having those professional photos makes a difference. Even if it is a $20 a month difference, I think professional photos pay dividends long term. And it's really important to do that as a step within your marketing process. Just one, for professionalism.
Right.
A company website that has a ton of photos that are professional and the properties are clean, that's going to attract owners way more than, you know, having a bit of your finger in the frame when you're taking a photo on your cell phone.
Or the person in the bathroom mirror as they're taking a photo of the bathroom.
Or you a little bit blurry on the edges and you're in the corner of the room trying to get a panoramic shot.
My absolute favorite one is when somebody has their phone and they are standing outside of the bathroom, but they've stuck the phone in and you can just see the phone in the hand. Lots of great comedy can be found on the MLS, anywhere you look.
My absolute favorite.
Tell me.
The flowers in the front yard. You just have a zoom in or like a really pretty sunset in the marketing list. Those, I think at that point, you got someone who really wants to show their photography skills, but maybe don't put that on your property marketing.
100%. And the way that I would talk about this in a sales process is to sell professional photos, right? Because I think that that's something that we let owners know. That's a charge for them, in my opinion. That's an owner charge. We are not covering the cost of photos. Maybe a hot take.
No, I don't disagree with that. Or have a higher leasing investment, right? So if you are, whatever you are selling to an owner, that I'm going to list your property, you're saying, hey, owner, I am going to get professional photos of your property. I'm going to write great marketing material for you. Maybe I'm doing a 360 inspection, and maybe I'm going to have a virtual walkthrough, a video our team's doing. We're going to do all this work to reduce the days that your property's on the market. That's going to cost you half of 1 month's rent. That's going to
75%. Full thing.
Exactly. So you're going to have this, I think that you should have some sort of cost associated that warrants the work you're doing, but you need to put in the work. You need to get the photos done and make sure you are showing this property to its maximum capability.
And I think the reason that we want to do that is because I don't know the statistics, so I'm going to make one up here. I think that 99% of your renters are starting their shopping online.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the way that the property is presented helps it to increase showings and also to lease it quicker. Because the mindset that our renters are in, if you've ever been a renter, a lot of times you've given your 30-day notice. You are trying to find a place to move into, and you need a place that looks ready for you to move all of your stuff in tomorrow if need be. So the presentation that we're giving of that property online is we need it to be vacant, we need it to be clean, we need it to be well lit. We need to make sure that as I'm looking at it from a renter's perspective, I can move in there tomorrow. And that's what we want to present. And a professional photographer does that and gets it there. Now, if you have someone in your team who's a pretty good photographer, great, amazing. That counts, right?
Have them use a professional camera. Give them the resources
to do it.
And I think, I mean, I've managed personally, when we look at multifamily portfolios, thousands of properties, and single family portfolios at any given time, it was about 250 properties.
Right.
So whenever we think about marketing, and you mentioning that most of the listings are online, one time, and I could give you the address for the property, had someone say, I've been looking at this neighborhood forever, and the second I saw a house was available, I knew I wanted it. One time out of hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of properties. So it makes a difference whenever you are getting good marketing materials, because that's not the norm. The norm is people looking at dozens of properties and they're making a wish list and they're sending them to their friends and family and they're saying, what do you think of this one? And their sister's coming back and saying, oh, that's so cute. And their sisters are like, oh, I don't love the bathroom, it looks a little dirty, right? You have so many people involved in this decision to rent a property. And if you are not putting your best foot forward, you are going to detract the people that really care about qualities of rentals, right?
Absolutely.
And if you're giving, I've always said this, Kristen.
Always said it.
5-star renters 5-star renters are attracted by 5-star properties.
100%.
You are not going to get top tier renters if you are not providing a top tier experience. No one is going to lease a property that's going to take great care of it if the property looks dingy or it looks dirty or it looks like it has not been well taken care of.
I agree. Yes. Mic drop. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so that's photos. Now, what accompanies our photos is marketing descriptions, right? I know we have agent remarks, we have public remarks, and a lot of things people are doing now is utilizing AI and utilizing, as we like to call them, Chad, right? ChatGPT, all of the Gemini, all of the AI softwares out there that are available.
I'm sure at least one person wrote a marketing description with Grok.
Grok?
Grok. not Gronk.
I don't know, whatever. Yeah, I was asking Albert about that one this morning. I didn't know what that was. Question. Should you use AI for this? How do you use AI for this? Should it be an expectation that we just have creative writers on staff to be able to write these descriptions? What does that look like, Candace?
If you have someone on your team who is incredible at writing marketing descriptions and they love doing it and they are quality, let them do it. They don't need to use AI. But I would say for most people who are in this space, they're not going to want to dedicate minutes to hours writing a marketing description for a property. I absolutely think utilize AI, but I do have some parameters with that.
Oh, lay them on us.
All right. So if you are using AI for your marketing descriptions, less is going to be more. You are not using AI to get a bunch of descriptive filler words. That's going to make you have this incredibly long, detailed marketing description that no one's going to read, right?
Right.
I have this joke where you know how you can like draft AI for emails, and now Gmail gives you the option to have simplified AI responses to emails. So it'll summarize your email. So people are now using AI in Gmail to write emails, and then people are using AI in Gmail to simplify the emails. So effectively, it's AI. Like the email's the same that they would have gotten if they just never used AI at all. Same concept with our marketing material. We are not going to use a ton of additional words with AI.
Fantastic. Beautiful.
Look at this wonderful, fantastic, gorgeous, wonderful, amazing. You know, it's going to waste people's time. Keep it clear, keep it clean, keep it to the parameters that we want people to know of the property. I think that the input we put with an AI is your output is only as good as the input you're giving it.
Correct.
So if you are telling it, write me a marketing description for this address, you're going to get crap. You're not going to get something that you're going to want to put on an advertisement. You need to have very clear standards. You need to know your company's tone. You can say, write me an informative description, highlight key features A, B, and C. Use a tone that is bright, uplifting, and descriptive. Keep it limited to blank amount of words. Include these key features and these disclosures, right? Keep it very clear because
you're going to get a great description with that.
Exactly. Better the input, better the output. So I think that when we're utilizing AI, the owners of the company need to use it first. They need to get comfortable. They need to test it out. They need to create the outline of it and then make it a Mad Libs where we have the outline and the team is only plug and playing the descriptions that we want included for that property. And the rest of it was created by the people who are running the company and know the tone they want in their marketing descriptions.
That's great. Now, there are, within the really big property management softwares out there are some AI features built into there. Are you able to, because I don't know this, are you able to put in the inputs like that into those features, or do you recommend using a third party outside of our property management software to be able to write these descriptions?
You're not going to get the same input you're going to get with an AI that's specifically attributed to allowing you to customize the inputs you're putting in. When you think about one that's built into a property management software, typically they're using the API in another software and they've already added those descriptors. So they have created a service within their website that is utilizing another AI and they already have the input saying, use this information and turn it into a marketing description for a single family home. They've already done that work, which makes it very hard for us to change the output that's going to happen because they've already set the descriptors. It works pretty well. I will say, like, if you're starting from scratch, if there were no other AI solutions out there and that's what we had, it is 10 out of 10, right?
Sure.
But we have more resources. We have the ability to create, let's say within ChatGPT, you can create a specific project where in the instructions of that project, you do exactly what I said. You put in the tone, you put in the amount of word count, you put in any additional information. You could even have your disclosure at the bottom, input in it and say for every single one, put in verbatim this block of text, right? So that could be your company information, any disclosures. So you can create projects and make it very custom. And I think that is going to appear a lot better than using the ones pre-built in, though they're functional. They do what they're meant to do.
Absolutely. Now, how do you feel about, sending everything over to the owner before it goes live for their approval?
I think it's neither here nor there. Some companies, they do it and it works very well. I've seen companies that request owners to submit information they want in their advertisement. So even on the owner onboarding form, we have a little section saying, add me any details you would like to be included in the advertisement. What are your favorite features about the property? And so they have those already built into it and then they don't need that additional approval.
Sure.
I think it works just as well. You can change an ad at any point. So you can list it live and say, hey, owner, look at your property. It's on the market. And then the owner can give you that feedback. But if you're doing the pre-work to get the information they want in the advertisement, you're typically not going to get pushback.
Makes sense. Okay. So at this point, we've taken photos, we've written a description, may or may not have sent it over to the owner for approval. Now, are we at the point that we're ready to push live? Is there anything else that we need to do at this point to get the property live and on the market?
I think it's very important that the person who is going to be showing the property has reviewed all of this information. The person that's going to be on site, and even if that's a team of people, they need to be very familiar with the ins and outs of the advertisement, because we do not want someone to read on an advertisement that there's a pool and then the team member not know. Exactly. So these are all things that I think should be communicated before we go live, and our team should be prepared. We have this new property coming. Goes back to us making sure that our team is all on the same page about what's happening within the business, because we don't want our team to get a call saying, hey, I saw you have this great 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom in this neighborhood. And they're like, oh, no, I don't think we have one because it was just listed.
Right.
So I think it's good for the team to know what's happening. Then we push live and we can send a, hey, owner, give us a pat on the back. We did our job. Your property is on the market email.
Awesome. Now that the property is on the market, question about self-showings. Should it be a person who is going out and showing the property every time? Do you like the utilization of self-showings? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, my hot take is I don't love self-showings.
Oh, no, I do. Oh, this will be fun.
So I think that they're important. I think that they're valuable. I do agree that they get properties rented faster, right? I think there are so many benefits to having self-showings. I do think it takes away the customer service part of the listing process. Yeah. I think it takes away from the one-on-one and the experience you have in renting a property and having that personal touch. So I think that when we're utilizing self-showings, there needs to be a QR code at the property that is a way to access information. Maybe the team's recorded a video at the property saying, here's the things you should look at. But I do think self-showings, though they give a lot of flexibility, they take away from that interconnectivity that we get during a leasing process.
Oh, that's a good point. You know, I've not really thought about that, because I think my brain jumped straight to that convenience piece of nobody has to go. Like, we don't need any manpower to be able to go out to that property to be able to show it, which I think that can be helpful. But I definitely see what you're saying there. Now, as you're saying that, what this brought up for me is we're seeing properties now sit on the market longer. And so I'm wondering if there is going to be a comeback of in-person showings, because if I am a listing agent or leasing agent, however you want to call that, and I'm going out to the property, I'm now able to understand from the resident what they're looking for. And if this property is not a fit, hey, we have 2 more in our portfolio that are not that far away that I think are matching exactly what you're looking for. Let's set up a time to go and look at them. And now I'm more in control of this process. So I'm wondering, now that there is this lag time between coming live and it getting rented, that may be something that's coming back. Have you seen that trend?
I could see that. And it's one of the markets are so specific, right? There are some markets where there are just so many properties live, it doesn't make sense to have someone on site every time. Some markets, open houses just don't make sense, right? It's so hit or miss on what that property specifically needs. And I think it's really important that the property manager in that market is an expert in that market, and knows, hey, this property is in a neighborhood where the people are going to expect a higher level of service. So I should be boots on the ground there, where this property is going to get 500 leads in the first 2 days. So we need self-showings to make it so we can get everyone in. And so I think I do think that there's going to be a shift. And there is probably dozens of residents that were lost because they didn't like a property and they didn't know that there was a similar one with those features in the same portfolio, right? So I think that we'll see a shift, but I think it's a constant cycle, right?
Absolutely.
We go to one end and we go to the far extreme, which is the lack of in-person showings. We're doing self-showings, and then it's going to sway, and it's going to keep going back and forth depending on what the market demands.
Sure.
Also, scams. There are so many scams online for properties and showings. And so to combat that, there also has to be parameters. Some companies are putting signs in the window saying, if you're not applying to this company, you are not applying to the right property, right? And so I think that there's going to have to be a shift in one way or the other, because the scams are going to continue rising.
That makes total sense. And so I think if we can stick here for just a minute, like kind of around the process end of this. And so if the property has been sitting on the market for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I don't know, when do we bring the owner back in and start to have a conversation with them about, a potential price drop. Is that this process here? Like, are we still kind of in marketing here whenever we're talking about price fluctuation and drops?
Yeah, so we're going to have a few stages. So we're going to begin with kind of our pre-listing stage. This is the stage that is going to be tied very closely to your make ready. So you are getting property ready, you're scheduling work, you're scheduling photos, you're writing your marketing material. That's all going to live in your pre-listing phase. The second you press live and you're sending the owner, hey, guess what? Your property's on the market. We are now in our property live stage. I think in the property live stage, there is really not too much communication that can happen there. I do think that weekly updates should be the expectation within companies, at a minimum bi-weekly updates. I do think after the first 2 weeks, 14 days, you should be looking at that average lead time. As we mentioned, we're going to have pulled all this information in the front, the average amount of average days on market, price per square foot, average leads at a property, and what our expectation is per leads. And this is going to be so market specific. One market I worked in, if we had 5 leads per day, that was more than enough. We'd know that property would rent very quickly. In another market, it had to be 20 leads per day or the property would sit. So you need to know what the expectations are in your market, because then you can go to the owner week 1, week 2 and say, hey, this is the expectation of the amount of leads we should have had for the property. This is where we are. We may need a price adjustment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the price adjustments is another thing that goes back to the sales process and having your salesperson prep the owner for the expectations of marketing and price drops. And that is where, like you said, knowing your numbers across the board. I have a team who knows it is 9 showings to 1 application. So they know that they need to be having at least 9 showings to get an application, and they need at least 3 applications to get a resident. And so that is then given to the sales team, to where whenever they're talking about the expectations, they're delivering those. So yes, owner, absolutely, we can start at the price of $2,200 per month. However, within the first week, if we have not had 9 showings scheduled, we're going to need to drop the price. And here's the reason why. And explaining to an owner, because I think a lot of times there's this price sensitivity for owners as well, where they're coming in and they may want a higher number than what the market can support. That's what I'm seeing a lot right now is, my mortgage is this, you can rent it out for this, we're now going to be in the red. And so there's a lot of sensitivity, in my opinion, around this pricing and price dropping, and making sure that our team is understanding from the sales side to whoever is handling this process of how to communicate with this owner sensitively of, hey, this is what's happening. But I think it starts at the beginning with our salesperson prefacing, these are our expectations, and if we don't see it, this is what we're going to have to do. Are you going to be okay with this? Is this something that you can financially do?
And I'm really glad you brought this up, because I think there's 2 tools every single team should have in their arsenal. Tool 1 is you need to know the average days on market and the cost per day a property is vacant. That is so incredibly important. Whenever we're talking to an owner, and let's say the rental rate is $1,000 a month, or let's say $3,000 per month. And so every single day that the property vacant, that's $100 that the owner is losing.
Such easy math. Thank you so much.
Going for easy math.
Thank you.
Right.
So it's $100 a day for the property to sit on the market.
Exactly. So we say, hey, owner, your property's been on the market for 14 days. Right now it's listed for $3,000 a month. We expect if we keep it at this rate, we are probably going to have at least 20 more days of vacancy. That's $2,000 that owner is losing in vacancy. As everyone in this industry knows, vacancy is the #1 ROI killer. You're going to lose more money on vacancy than repairs, than on costs to turn the property, on the management investment. Vacancy costs more money than any of those other things. So you talk to this owner and you say, okay, it's going to cost you $2,000 if we are waiting for the 20 days that's going to take us to rent the property, or we reduce it by $50. And so we do this reduction. It's now going to be more comparable to the market, and you're going to save a lot more money than the $2,000 it will cost us to leave it vacant. 50 times 12. What's that number, Kristen?
Shoot, I don't know. 600, I think.
$600. So
I hope.
I think that's right. That feels right. So in the $600 that you are going to lose by us reducing this rental rate, and we will be able to get a renter sooner, you'll have the $2,000 you are not going to spend. It's not always going to go in your favor, right? There's going to be times where we need a more significant reduction.
Yep.
But if that's the case, the ROI is almost always going to cost more than the cost of us lowering that rental rate.
Yes.
Another thing you mentioned is I can't afford it. I'm now in the red. I think it's very important that our team understands that there is an iceberg when it comes to rental profitability. And so, yes, the top is the rental, right? It's the money that you're making. It's the money that you're spending, right? You're going to have in and out. Sometimes you're going to be cash flow positive. Sometimes you're going to be cash flow negative. When you're buying a property, there is an inherent risk. It is an investment. It is not a gift, right? You invest in a property, and investments do occasionally come with losses. But you're investing because of the long-term net gains are going to be positive. If an owner cannot afford the mortgage, if they don't get a certain amount of rent, they need to sell that property.
That is, or manage it themselves.
Exactly. Like that is, and really even managing it themselves. What happens when the AC goes out? What happens when
They will get sued.
Exactly. So whenever an owner is that concerned and they say, I cannot pay my mortgage if I don't get that number, that is a red flag. That is not an owner you want in your portfolio, because they are not able to infuse the property with cash when they need to. And that's a red flag.
Absolutely.
So as we look at that iceberg, it's really important to point out to the owners who are just worried about money, but possibly have the finances to be able to incur those costs. We need to explain to them, you're not holding this property because you're going to make $70 a month. You're holding this property because it's an investment and you're gaining equity on the property.
Tax advantages.
Exactly. You're going to be eventually be able to do a 1031 exchange with this property. You can reinvest in bigger properties. You're going to sell. Your kids are going to inherit.
Right.
So if we're holding on to a property, there needs to be an understanding that investment comes with inherent risk. And we need to be able to have that candid conversation with owners of, if it doesn't make sense for us to rent this property at this price, maybe you need to consider selling your property.
Yeah.
And so as their trusted advisors, our ultimate fiduciary duty is to our owners. And so it is also our responsibility that if we do not think it is a smart financial decision, to have that candid conversation with them and tell them, hey, I don't know that renting this property is inherently the best investment if you can't afford a slight price reduction for us to actually lease the property. What happens if it sits for 2 more months because we're not lowering the rent?
And that is the question we should ask in the sales process. It should not get this far that your leasing managers are having to have this type of conversation. And I think that this is a point that the BDM can step back in, because this is, to me, a very sales-driven conversation. And that's the way it needs to be, to where we're asking questions, to where we're digging deep, to where we're understanding where they're coming from before we're making that suggestion on how to move forward.
Exactly.
And so I think that it should never get to the point that the leasing manager is having to have that deep of a conversation. The BDM, the salesperson, should have already handled that conversation from the beginning and gone through these different scenarios so that the owner is prepped for this. That's not fair to the rest of the team, for us on the sales side to not completely do our due diligence to figure out that this is a good fit owner.
Exactly. And those are all pre-qualifying questions that we should have. And I'm going to look at the camera when I say this, because I think this is very important. If you are selling to an owner and the owner says, I am not going to rent with you, or I'm not going to list my property with you because this company said that they will get my rent for a higher rate, and you say, we'll list it for that price.
No.
Okay, that is the absolute best way to get the wrong fit owner. Like that
to get a 1-star review.
Exactly, because guess what? Good for them. That company is willing to overpromise and undeliver. Fantastic, but that is not our responsibility to combat.
No,
If an owner will not move forward with you because this other company is going to list it for a higher rate, let them fail. Let them fall on their face. Do not be the person who falls on your face because you are trying to keep up with a number. And if you are like, oh crap, maybe I could have just rented it at that amount, you need to run your stats better. You need to know that that's a rate you can get. If you are constantly underpricing properties, then that's an internal policy problem. That is not a underestimating what rent's going to be problem.
Absolutely. I would hear that all the time from owners as a BDM, but their marketing, the price that they are listing their property at is not a sales tool for you. It is not doing you any services to be able to list it higher. I mean, you think that if you're percentage based, maybe you'll make a few extra dollars, but if it's sitting on the market long term, nobody's winning. And nobody's winning at that point.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, but I do feel
you're never wrong.
I do feel that if a company is using the rental rate as a primary sales tool, that is foundationally an issue with the services they're offering. Is that correct?
Yes, 100%. You listing your price, you being able to list properties for a higher price than anyone else in your market. I don't think that that's something that you...
If you're now renting properties.
Yeah, exactly. If you are listing them higher than everyone and also renting them, congratulations, you have cracked the code. Please give us a call and let us know how you have done that. But if you are constantly winning deals, but your days on market are like 75 days, are you really winning?
And I have seen companies that do, on average, rent properties for up to 10% more than what other companies do. But they do that by having an incredible market reach. They do that by residents seeing the company name and just knowing that that company takes care of their residents. And they're like, I want to rent with them because they take care of their people. That is absolutely possible. You can list properties for a higher rate because you provide exceptional services, but that is not a tool whenever you are doing the exact same thing as every other company, but you're promising higher rents and you're constantly having to lower it.
Absolutely.
My second hot take is if you are going to let the owner pick the rental rate, they have 7 days.
Ooh.
7 days.
7 days?
7 days. If you have tracked the average days on market, if you track the average amount of leads that you have at a property to rent it, and you're able to track all of those stats, you are going to know within 7 days if that price is not working. Unless you are a unicorn market that you just get one lead per week and it rents. Then,
Wow.
okay, maybe
Also, let us know where you are because that's awesome.
Exactly. And if that's the case, great. Maybe you give them 14 days. But really, you will know within 7 days if this number is working or if it's not working. And I know we don't want to tell owners we'll give you a week because it doesn't feel like a long period of time.
We want to tell them that.
Exactly. And we should give them a set amount of time. Great. Let it be 14 days. But if it's beyond 2 weeks, you are now literally flushing money down the toilet.
Absolutely. You are. And these conversations, again, should be had before the owner signs the management agreement. Before they get into our systems and our processes, they should already know what the expectation is here for their dollar amount, what we can list it for. As a sales tactic, one thing that I always like to do and I like to teach people to do is to give them a best case and a worst case scenario. So now we have a range that we're working within. So we know your property will rent somewhere between $2,900 and $2,600. And having that clarity then to give that over to the team makes it a smoother transition because now the owner knows we're not going to go below $2,600, but it gives our leasing team the ability to drop the price when it's needed. Because now if they need a more significant price drop and we need to go $150 lower, they have the ability to do that because the owner understands the range that we are staying within. And they have agreed to a high price point and a low price point. And that expectation is set. And that is happening in the sales process because that is sales. That is what we're doing. We're making sure that they're understanding all of the terms because our operation team, their job is not to sell the owner on an idea or sell the owner on a price. That is not the function of their job. That's not their role. It should be the BDM or our salesperson that's doing it. And then our operations folks are showing up and are able to deliver that absolute unreasonable hospitality because they're not having to convince the owner. They're having to fulfill on the promises that were given in the sales process. And that's how we set up for the best amount of success. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts?
I very much agree. And I think that there's twofold because there are going to be times where the remaining team, the leasing team, has to come in and pull comps for the property. And maybe that number does not fully align with the business development manager. But there's no reason that the sales are not just the business development manager, the full sales team.
Right.
There's no reason the sales team don't set that expectation up front and say, we are going to rerun comps when it's a little bit closer. These are my expectations based on now, but I cannot promise this will be the rate whenever we rerun comps later. We can talk about all of the factors that result in it. And again, if we're getting pushback from an owner of, well, that number won't cover my mortgage, then we're having a bigger conversation about why that is an issue. And we're able to then offboard this owner. And that shouldn't be an issue.
Or not even bring them on.
Exactly. And so these are all conversations that we should be having very early on. And
Absolutely.
I completely agree with that. And I think also determining the language we need to have those conversations. One thing that it can feel a little bit harsh, but the market doesn't care about the owner's mortgage. The market doesn't care how much they spent on replacing the air conditioning unit or painting. And a lot of owners will say, well, it has a brand new AC. People are not paying more
I'm not going to pay $10 more because your AC is brand new.
Yep. I will pay $10 more because there's fresh paint or there's new flooring. But when we're doing really big capital expenditures in the property, but it's not giving an immediate inherent value to the resident, you're not going to pay more for it, right?
Or for your solar panels.
Exactly.
I know we're not talking to property owners right now. I'm so sorry. That just popped out of me. I know all of you listening that are property managers, property management company owners know. But anyways, solar panels. That's not going to add money to your rent.
Exactly. So whenever we're thinking about the numbers we're giving owners and the pushback we're getting, it isn't us saying that we cannot get you this rate. We are saying the market does not warrant this number. And so that is a big conversation. And I even joke, it's like the don't shoot the messenger conversation. Like, hey, I'm just here. I'm here to tell you what the market's demanding. The market has its own decisions it's going to make. It is going to do its own thing. I have no control over the market, but I am an expert in it.
Correct.
So I'm able to come here and give you this information and help you make an educated decision based on my understanding of the market that we are in. And that's a conversation that should be had really throughout this whole process. From the point that we were meeting the owner for the first time, we were saying, hey, this is the market we're in, this is the expectation. And then as soon as it gets handed that, hey, your property, the make ready's done, this is what we're seeing in the market, this is the expectations. Hey, your property's live, the market's really hot right now, this is what's happening, this is how many properties we've rented in the last 2 weeks, this is our average days on market. All of this should be communicated throughout the full process so there's no surprises when a property sits a little longer or when it rents really quickly.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure we've all seen it, an owner coming back and saying, it rented too fast, you underpriced it. No, it rented quickly because the market demands that, but just because we rented it quickly does not mean it was underpriced. Oftentimes it just means it's a hot market and there's a lot of people interested, and we would have just sat on a vacant property and lost money had we increased that rental rate.
Absolutely. I just want to reiterate a point that you said in there. It is never my price. It is never the company's price. It is the price that we have found that the market will support. And that is the language that I teach to the salespeople is you don't ever say, you can say, I pulled comps and what I found. No, it's like I pulled comps and what the market is showing us is that your property will rent between this amount and this amount. It's never our recommended price. No, it is the price of the market. And that is such an important distinction because it also gives you a common enemy, right? And that common enemy is the market. Like, hey, Candice, I understand. I also want your property to rent at $4,000 a month.
More money
if I could make that happen, I want you. But I can't tell you that because that's a disservice to you. Because then it goes back to what you said of knowing how much it's going to cost per day. Every day that property sits vacant, it is costing you $120 every single day. We don't want you to just be throwing money out the window. So the price that we are finding here within the market is what is going to get it rented for the quickest amount of time with the lowest amount of vacancy available with the best tenant. And this is the price that we have found to be able to do that. And that language is really important because it's like what I found, my pricing this here, that just creates, it's mine. It's now.
I'm the one who made this decision
Exactly.
and now I'm the enemy if it's not what you
correct.
want.
But now it's not me. This market, and I wish it wasn't so, but it is.
But look at it, we are struggling through this market together.
Because once we can, we'll both make money, but we can't. So it's important that we really use that distinctive language when presenting this, and especially whenever we're going in for price drops. If we do have to drop lower than the initial price that we thought, we have to make sure that it's not me, it's not my fault, it's not the company's fault. This is what the market's doing because that's the truth. We are not lying about anything, but we're not some magic power that can dictate what a property is going to rent for. We have to go with supply and demand. And right now, the demand for your house is not at $4,000. The demand for your house is at $3,200.
And I think it's very important also to explain to owners what market they're entering early. So as a salesperson coming in and saying, this is what we're seeing on the market, the time of the year, this is fantastic. You're coming right in spring, or, school is going to be starting, so we're going to see a drop in interest. These conversations can be had very early on. So it's not a surprise to the owner when properties are or are not moving.
Absolutely.
And all of this is information. Again, if we run the stats, most of this can be proactively discussed if we have all of the statistics in our back pocket of time of year, days on market, the average price per square foot, and we're able to say year over year, this is when we see the trend go down and the trends go up. And make it a visual, make a graph if you can. These are all things that are going to be incredible resources to be able to provide to your owner whenever you're in the sales process and beginning the listing process.
Absolutely. That's so good. So, Candice, then my question to you here, right? So we have the description that has gone out. We've talked a lot about the owner here and how we're going to treat the owner and give them this experience. But really, the whole point of this process is to attract a resident into the property. So photos and a listing description, is that enough? Do we need to follow up with potential residents? How do we do that? What does that cadence look like? Is there a magic process that we can run here to be able to get tenants to come in and just rent the property?
So I think there's, and I'm actually going to be asking very similar questions of you in just a moment. But in my experience, we are selling to residents as much as we are to owners, right? So the way that we are targeting marketing materials, there's no reason we shouldn't have a resident who is renting a property. If they're moving out to rent another property, then they shouldn't be renting with us again.
That is correct.
And also, one thing to consider, and we talked about this a little bit during our talk at Nationals about creating raving fans, is one property will have one, maybe two owners, but could have a half dozen to a dozen residents, right? So when we're building our brand and our reputation and creating these long-term meaningful relationships, the way that we're communicating with residents from the very beginning is all going to apply to the experience that they have and our ability to turn these residents into raving fans. And I think a lot of that comes with the language and the way that we're providing information to them. So having very clear marketing descriptions that are tailored to the interests of the resident, right?
Yeah.
We're able to be very clear and provide details on the property, having some video walkthroughs or the 3D or the 360 showings. All of these resources are going to give a resident a better experience of the property and also a team that cares about them. I can't count the amount of times I've talked to residents or people who've rented that have said like, oh, I wanted to rent this property, but I couldn't get in touch with anyone. That is such a horrible first impression to give someone who's going to be potentially a primary advocate for you, that you need to have a dedicated team to that position of attracting residents and creating these long-term meaningful relationships. And I'm actually very curious of your opinion, as you worked really hard on creating sales language for owners and doing the things you need to do to attract owners to use our services. How can we use those same tools when writing language for residents?
Absolutely. I think that there is a clear process there, just as we have for owners, right? We want an initial inquiry, a new lead. We want to have a call with them. We want to go to their property. I think it translates not exactly one-to-one, but pretty closely over to the resident side there. It's where they inquire on a property, and then we want to make sure that they set up a showing. And then after the showing, we want to make sure that they have any information, that they know how to make an application and apply. And then once they have that, are they actually going to fill out the application? Once they have filled out the application, then that goes into leasing, and we're not there yet, right? But really breaking down what are those key steps that we want the resident to be able to take, and how are we going to filter them through each one of those, to where I see that quite honestly lacking in a lot of our single family properties. Whereas in multifamily, I know you know that is a very robust system that they have built out, where they're nurturing people throughout the year, even if they go and they rent with somebody else. But I think in single family, this is something that maybe we don't do as much. Why? I don't know. Maybe you have a hot take on that. But I think that understanding that process that the resident goes through is just as important as understanding the process for the owner, because each point requires different communication and language and things around that. But you have a hot take. I know you do.
So excited.
Come on, Candice, give it to us.
Okay, so I worked in multifamily for years and years. And the way that residents are talked about in multifamily, and this is going to be really uncomfortable for some single family owners, but they talk about residents for multifamily the way that we talk about owners for single family. Like, these are the most important people that we are ever going to talk to, and we need to make sure that they love their experience with us.
Yes.
So far as we would have competitions at some of the companies I worked at the most convenient way to get a person who is seeing a property to remember us and to not go to another property. So far that we would keep pints of ice cream in a freezer, and someone would come take a tour of the property. We would give them a pint of ice cream so they had to go straight home and they couldn't go to our other properties. So whenever we think about attracting owners, and like we're doing all these sparkly marketing things and we want our owners to be so excited to work with us, that mentality for multifamily is what drives them to get doors. Because if you think multifamily, you've got one owner or potentially a group of owners.
Yeah,
and then you have thousands of doors. So the money's coming from the residents. They care a lot more. And we do care about vacancy. But I mean, there's companies that will allow, when their teams get to 90 to 95% or 90% occupancy, that their team can start wearing jeans on Fridays, or they can start wearing different colors to work, or like they're able to have they can have weekends off. So Saturdays offices are closed when we're at 97% occupancy. And that is a perspective that feels a little bit weird to single family property managers because we don't think about it on the same metric that multifamily does. And I think that single family should take some pointers from these multifamily companies because multifamily, you will find one resident that's lived at 10 different properties that one multifamily company manages because they just love that company. Or you have residents who will tell all of their friends, do not rent from this company because they provide horrible experiences. And so that can happen to single family as well, but we just don't take it as seriously. And I mean, we hear all the time, well, if we get a 1-star review from a resident, it means we're doing our job.
Oh my gosh, that's my least favorite phrase now.
I know. And it's like, no, you should not be justifying 1-star reviews that you're doing your job because there's always ways to mitigate that in the process.
Absolutely.
I'm going to do an aggressive subject change really quick. Kristen and I are both, if you're listening, you don't know this, but we're currently wearing matching sweaters unplanned.
Very unplanned.
We walk in and see we're matching, and I was like, should I go change? But our sweaters say, hold on, partner, check the process, and have a little frog with a little handgun. And so we need to make sure that we're going through and we have a streamlined process that is allowing for us to mitigate these bad reviews.
Yes.
So that was my very aggressive hot take. But my question for you is, how can we use these tools in attracting owners and create this language and create this experience for residents that makes them want to stay, makes them want to come back?
Absolutely. I think that it's important here. And I think everything you said there is very valid because we know that it is possible because we have multifamily companies that are doing it at mass scale, right? Of thousands of residents, hundreds of thousands sometimes of inquiries that are coming in. And so first thing for us to all understand is that this is very possible. We are not talking about anything that is impossible to do. And so I think that it starts with mapping the journey of what people have. What are they seeing? How are these leads coming into us, right? Are they coming to us from Zillow? Are they coming to us from which methods are they coming to us from? Once we know how they're coming to us, then we start to lay out the first sequence. And automation is going to be really key in this here. We have an email and a text message that goes out whenever we receive an inquiry from somebody. Or if they're coming in and they're scheduling a time to go and see the property, great, then we're confirming that property tour with them. The day before, an hour before, 45 minutes before, we are confirming that this is actually going to happen. And if they no-show, there's a separate sequence that they no-showed the property. If they're not interested in the property, we are sending out different properties to them that are within our portfolio. We are trying to keep this one resident that's inquiring on this one property within our ecosystem of properties so that even if the one that they're initially inquiring about isn't the right fit, they can go elsewhere and they can find a different property within our portfolio that they can rent from. So I think it all breaks down in the same way as the owners, but it's mapping that journey and then building out different touch points throughout there to make sure that we can get somebody through, whether it's the property they inquire about or a different one, but they're renting with us at the end of that process.
Exactly. And there's absolutely no reason if a property is rented, you are not sending an email to every single resident who applied or showed interest, all of the similar units that you have currently on the market, and saying, you know, we are so bummed that you are not living with us here at this property, but look at all of the other options you have, and you can transfer your application within blank amount of days and have an automated sequence. So if you're holding an application for 30 days, let them know when there's 15 days left for them to transfer, 5 days left, and the day before, give them ample opportunities to move that application somewhere else, because that is going to reduce our vacancy and that is going to create a better experience for them. And they're going to feel like they actually are moving in somewhere where people care that they're there. And I think it's very easy to forget that we think of a property as this asset that we are managing, but we are creating a home for someone. And this is the most important decision they are going to make.
Absolutely.
A home is there's nothing comparable to having a home. And so being able to be an integral part of that process for someone and making them feel safe and secure and wanted, I mean, that speaks volumes, and that's how you get raving fans throughout the leasing process.
And I think, something else that came up as you've been talking is, this was from earlier, I can't remember if it was this episode or last episode, right? But somebody is like, no, I've been waiting for a property in this neighborhood to open up. So if you sign a new door in the same neighborhood that you had 50 other applications on, you should be pulling those 50 people that applied for this property and sending them out a message and letting them know that another one has come available in this same neighborhood.
That is even if it's been a month or two.
Doesn't matter.
I think you should still send out a mass blast to those people, because you never know how early they were looking, or if they're in a situation where they may have been moved somewhere else or they're waiting to find a property, just because it's been a little bit of time should not be an excuse not to reach out to people.
Absolutely.
Okay, if it's been 5 years, maybe not. But if we're looking within the last 6 months, it does not do any harm to send out a message saying, hey, we have this great new property on the market. This is the location. Because you may have that person who drove around the neighborhood and fell in love with a property and couldn't get it. And that's the dream home. And maybe they are in a short-term lease. You don't know their situation, and it does not hurt to try.
Absolutely. And I think that tracking all of your interest, all of your inquiries, right, all of your tenant resident leads inside of a CRM is probably the easiest way for you to get really clean data into what is happening in your marketing process there, specifically with your applicants or with your potential residents, right? They have not submitted an application yet. Because then we can break down, just like in the sales process, our leasing, marketing, whatever process, tenant process here that we're running, right? Do we get a lot of inquiries, but then no house tours, right? Or do we get house tours and then we get no applications? Or are we getting people doing applications, but then a lot of them are not qualified, right? We're able to then break down to see micro conversions as a whole within our tenant prospecting process here to be able to view, how are we doing? What is working well within this process? What is not working well? Are we not communicating well enough? And we can just see so many things that are happening whenever we track all of this data inside of a CRM section of your software, whatever you're using. But that gives us so much data into how we are doing and how we're communicating.
And where we are losing people.
Exactly.
And this also all ties back into having this information in our back pocket of how long properties are sitting. We can also have information on if a listing's formatted this way, we're more likely to get an application, or we're going to attract qualified leads. Because if you are getting a lot of leads on a property that are not qualified to live there, you need to more clearly explain your standards up front before they're scheduling a showing. So we can fix a lot of holes in our process by documenting and reviewing and making sure that our processes are well understood by everybody on our team.
Absolutely. That is all fantastic stuff, because the goal for everyone, the goal for the property management company, for the resident, and for the owner is to find a place to live and to be able to have everything just work well together and have a occupied unit. That is everyone's goal. And so if we're all working together to do that, and we're able to communicate that in the way that people want to receive that information, then we can go ahead and move forward.
Exactly. I don't think I could have said it better myself.
So to wrap us up here, I think that having a defined process for your marketing, which is from getting the property listed, going through and getting it on the market, having people come and view the property, all of these pieces working together,
that's what's going to get your property rented, and it's going to make your owners and your residents much more happy.
Absolutely. So final thoughts, Candace, on the marketing process.
Track it like you do with owners. Make sure that you are having good communication on both ends. Communication is key, and put in as much effort into attracting residents as you are to owners.
Absolutely. 100%.
Wonderful. Any final thoughts for you on how we can attract more residents to our properties?
I think that it is less the words you say and the process that you take to be able to do it.
Wonderful. Hold on, partner.
Check the process.
We'll see you next time on
Bye. Thank you.